Google-owned platform on Friday announced it wants to protect the ability to, quote, openly debate political ideas, even those that are controversial or based on disproven assumptions.
I don't get that.
Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to make sure disinformation spreads like wildfire?
Help me out here, Rev.
Why do you want to be open to that?
You know, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all these other places would be held liable, or like Fox News, if they put out false information. And so YouTube is now saying we're cool with false information, which, again, I'm just baffled why these big tech companies think that they don't think that they don't have to live by the rules that everybody else lives by. They don't have to live by the rules that everybody else has to live by. And that's one of the reasons we're in trouble. Our democracy is in trouble. And you have, again, 2 years later, you've got YouTube saying, you know what, we're fine with the conspiracy theories that almost took down American democracy. We're fine with the conspiracy theories that led to riots on January the 6th. We're fine with the conspiracy theories that, again, almost destroyed our election because it overturned a fair and free democratic election. I mean, explain this to me, Rev. I don't understand.
Well, I wish I could explain it. I mean, it is an outrageous decision. And the timing of it, as we're getting heated up toward an election process and the preliminaries starting within days. I mean, you already have candidates announcing every week. And now you're going to allow open the gates for disinformation. I mean, didn't we just see Fox News hit with a huge judgment and a huge decision? And you're going to go counter that? I mean, it makes no business sense, and it makes no sense in terms of the future of how we have discourse in this country. It's an outrageous decision, and I hope it's legally challenged by many people.
So let's get more on this from the co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box, Andrew Rossberg. And Andrew, what's the reasoning behind this? I can't make sense of it.
I'll give you an explanation. It may not be rational, or maybe you'll think it's rational. You may think it's shameful, frankly, which is that we are now in this environment where big tech and big companies writ large are so concerned about the regulatory world that they are confronting, and frankly, the House of Representatives that they could be confronting, and others that are thinking about regulating them, that this is one way they think to get in their better graces. I don't know if they're going to get in their good graces ever, but this is as much a political calculation as it is an economic one. The economic one being if there is greater regulation against them, that they're going to have a harder time down the line. And interestingly enough, they're more fearful. They're more fearful of Republicans.
Republican conspiracy theorists. You're saying that they're doing this because they know that Republicans that might take control of Washington are conspiracy theorists who spread lies that undermine American democracy.
They are so fearful. They are so fearful of this Republican Party. And you can look at what Ron DeSantis has done in Florida. I know we talk about that, and that's almost become symbolic of the situation. But they're so fearful of that. Plus, I think in some cases, a sense in parts of the country, unfortunately, who believe some of this misinformation, that their services, therefore, aren't fair more broadly. Now, obviously, I don't think we subscribe to that philosophy, but there are enough people who have that view, so unfortunately. And so I think that they are, unfortunately, pandering to both of those perspectives. Now, you mentioned the economic piece. I can't imagine this helps with advertisers. It hasn't helped Elon Musk with advertisers, so it's in that regard, it's very hard to understand how they get to this conclusion.
It really is. Also, later today at its Worldwide Developers Conference, Apple is expected to announce a mixed reality headset capable of offering immersive virtual reality experiences, as well as a view of the real world with digital objects and environments laid on top of it. Help. So what is this a game?
So they're gonna look supposedly like ski goggles. You can see an image of it right there. And this is
Okay.
the next much more immersive and frankly expensive version of the metaverse, which we've been talking about for quite some time. In some cases, actually, this at $3,000. You should know the expectation from Apple is not
God.
that this is going to be a barn burner. In that, it's not that everybody's going to run out and for $3,000 buy this. This is sort of the tip of the iceberg in terms of the tech, and the idea is that over time, just the way a plasma TV screen, which used to be $10,000, has come down remarkably in price. This is the beginning of that. It actually should help, by the way.
So how's
That's a
this
lot of money.
How's this different from Google
Like,
Glasses?
what is this?
Well, Google Glass was something you could see through. This is going to be much more like Oculus, which is something you can't really see through, though it has cameras on the outside which are actually looking for you. This is going to be a very sort of super sophisticated metaverse where you and I we're all going to be in the same room together, and if I look this way and you look at, we're going to be looking at each other, and there's going to be gaming, there's going to be office capabilities to it. It's going to have a whole, and we'll see. And there's some people who say nobody wants to live in this world, and there's other people who think this is the future.
So
No,
wait,
wait.
everybody in the room is going to have everyone in the room is going to have a $3,000 pair of
Everybody in there will be in the virtual
Used
room,
reality
and they can
glasses
actually
on?
pretend that they're with other human beings instead of
that
just
could-
saying, "Hey,
Well,
would
I'll
you
tell you
like to
look,
come
there's
together, come over to my apartment, and we can like play Risk together?"
Well, but those are the trivial versions of it. There are serious ones. A doctor in New York or in California could help.
There you go.
Could help somebody in Africa somewhere. I mean, literally, there are real purposes to this. By the way, it could change
great.
travel. If you want to go on a trip and see something, you could literally go on a trip and put your goggles on. I know that may not sound
No,
nearly as fun as
just
getting on an
stop.
airplane, but this is where it's going, folks, I think. Though obviously there's a lot of folks who think that this is going to be a big bust. So we'll see.
Well, and by the way, I'm sure Apple hopes that people will be looking back at this clip like we look back at the Today Show clip where they're laughing and mocking at like the coming of the internet.
I remember that.
No, yeah, no, I'm
I'm just thinking, why not just go out on a jog?
Yeah, but it's just all too simple because that's good for you. It's healthy. You get sunlight, be healthy, you'll live
Save
longer.
the tape.
The stress.
Save the
Save tape. I gotta ask him really quickly.
Okay, really quick.
Yeah.
I don't know where the saying comes from. You can't keep a good man down. We've all heard that saying, right?
Yeah.
I am fascinated, Andrew, by the fact that the Fed can't keep a strong economy down. Fascinated
What about the
by
Fed
that
meeting
fact.
after the jobs report?
And by the way, I would say this: if Donald Trump were in office, if Che Guevara were in office, if whoever was in office,
Okay.
I'm USA #1. We've got a strong, powerful military, and this economy, the Fed can't keep it down.
Can't keep it down. The strength of the consumer, the strength of jobs, you're seeing it. Even wages have remained elevated. The question is going to be what the Fed now does about it, because it's not clearly as effective as they want to be. Do they keep pressing? The market doesn't think so, though we've now talked to enough Fed watchers who think that they're going to have to. But boy, is this economy moving. I will say the one thing that a number of bankers are starting to worry about is the idea that consumers are using more and more credit, and that at some point in this YOLO economy, there are people spending beyond their means at this point. And when does that hit? And does that become a problem? But boy, if things keep going, maybe it never does.
Okay, CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin. We'll stay on that. Thank you very much. And coming up on Morning Joe, in a new twist on reality TV, jury duty drops an unsuspecting civilian in a fake courtroom process run entirely by actors. That includes James Marsden, who joins us with a look at the docu-style comedy from Amazon Studios. Plus, what do NBA dynasties working at home and the country of Canada have in common? They are all part of the new edition of Brand Up, Brand Down. Donnie Deutsch comes back with his latest installment next on Morning Joe.
The world that we're venturing off into is a world unlike any other world, including the Greek world, that I can begin to relate to pertaining to artificial intelligence. Just to give you an example of the things that you put over your eyes, that they said it was $3,000 for virtual reality. You could basically be making love. I'm just going to use this for a quick example. You could be making love to a 400-pound man or a 400-pound woman, and basically you're fantasizing through this imagery that you put over your eyes, and you could actually believe that you was having sex with somebody as fit as a fiddle while you're in bed with somebody that's 400 pounds. Or, better than that, not having sex with nobody and just fantasizing to the point of
This is going to be fluid. It is a marathon.
Masturbation. So the portrayals are endless in regards towards what they just got through talking about. Yes, there probably is advantages to it, like they was talking about with a doctor being able to give out information to another doctor or to another patient on the other side of the world. But those assets are probably going to be far and few between in comparison to people that's going to be dirtily minded in using that particular product in a bad way versus a good way. It's just like anything else that gets shoved out there on the market. It don't matter if it's guns, it don't matter if it's whatever. There's going to be people that's going to abuse that particular item. That in some ways is going to be bad and other ways are going to be good. And the reason why I say it's going to be bad, it's probably going to cause divorces in people's lives. You know, couples are going to have to make an agreement before they ever get married, if they're going to stay true to one another, towards never ever diverting over into artificial intelligence. See how far that goes with the loyalty of each other. But let's say you was going to take a vacation and you put into your little slot, your little time slot, that you wanted to go to Italy. And you sat there for hours and hours at a time discovering the things that you've always wanted to discover about Italy. In the sense of satisfying that particular appetite towards wanting to go to Italy, you've actually done two things. You've satisfied the mind towards wanting to go to Italy, and you've eliminated all the carbon dioxide going up into the atmosphere in regards towards the plane trails that the plane trails leave every time that they take off with a group of people towards going to Italy. Now, we have recently went through Memorial, and I personally have noticed the increase of our temperature, and I've also noticed the increase of the intensity of the sun just within the past 4 or 5 days that has struck off into the 90s. I think today it's supposed to be 90 again, and tomorrow I think it's supposed to drop a little bit down to 88. But it was as if that we surged from the 70s up into the high 80s and the low 90s just within a matter of hours. And the reason being, I think, other than the planet itself warming up from the bottom part of our Earth, below our feet, but because they claimed that the airline industry done better this Memorial in 2023 than what they have done in the past 3 to 5 years. As far as people having extra money, people getting on their airplanes, and they may not be going to Italy. They may just, you may be in Wisconsin and you wanted to go to Georgia, or you was in California and you wanted to go over to New York, or vice versa. The bottom line is this: because of the increase of carbon dioxide going up into the atmosphere, it basically tore down what little bit of ozone protection layer that we did have above America, to the degree that now more people are going to be more susceptible in not only getting sunburns, but more people are going to be more susceptible in getting skin cancer because of the lack of protection. Whenever you have an excellent holiday weekend that follows by excessive temperatures rising all over the country because America celebrates Memorial Day to where other countries don't, you're going to see this fluctuation. Why scientists and meteorologists has not yet figured this out is beyond me, because we know for a fact that during 9/11, whenever aviation was grounded here in America, that our ozone layer actually started increasing. It started healing. It started getting better. And there's been other times, periods of time, to where we have seen a massive decrease or a massive increase of the very same subject matter that I'm talking about pertaining to the ozone layer, based upon airline and automobile activity. That goes back to human consumption, goes back to the human factor of what we're doing to not only our planet below our feet, but also what we're doing to the planet above our heads. And you have to admit that the bubble that we're in, it is not just a bubble per se towards what we're walking on, but it is a bubble outside the rim of gravity, that we are all living in that same bubble, and whatever people does as a large, regardless whether it be on this side of the planet or the other side of the planet, it does affect the outer layers of the bubble. I personally think that that's where Tina Turner got her inspirations pertaining to the Thunderdome. That basically it's a dome that's over the planet. You can call it a Thunderdome. You can call it a quiet dome. You can call it a transitional dome. You can call it whatever dome you want to call it. But we're basically over a dome above our head that is basically a ecosystem in and of itself. And once you start affecting the ecosystem, it starts affecting you. Just like the things below our feet. It's an ecosystem below our feet. Once you start affecting the ecosystem below our feet, then the ecosystem starts affecting us. One thing adds to another. Forever action is a reaction. I don't know if I got now. I think it was maybe some scientist that said that, Einstein, whoever it was. But in reality, it is that way. And I've said this before. We are in an area right now that we never should have been in if things would have been properly handled in the early to late 80s, early 90s, late 80s. If things would have been handled properly, we would not have to be dealing with the complications and the challenges that we're dealing with today if things had been handled properly. We know that things was not handled properly pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy coming from the Reagan administration. So basically, that's all spilt milk now. And because it's spilt milk, we basically can't go back and retract from the mistakes that's already done been made. But what we can do is learn from those mistakes. And what we can do is modify our living in adjusting what we do and what we don't do. And I don't know, maybe the $3,000 pair of glasses, which I'm sure they'll go down, virtual reality. They already have virtual reality stuff out there now to where you can put over your lens. And the only reason why that I knew about the sexual activity was because I seen a thing on TV where basically a man and a woman, both of them had a set of goggles on, and they could determine on who that they wanted to make love to, or how much that they wanted to make love to, pertaining to the onslaught of the settings of which way that they set the settings of whether or not they wanted to make love to a 22-year-old man or a 42-year-old man, whether or not they wanted to make love to a 19-year-old blonde with blue eyes, or whether or not they wanted to make love to a 35 brunette lady with brown eyes. And I know that sounds crazy, but that is the world that we live in today. And there's nothing that I can do to eliminate that, because like I said a while ago, we are in an area that we never should have fallen off into the rim to, And because of it, we're seeing great suffering in aspects that is unimaginable towards people basically not being able to handle this type of technology. I mean, in some ways, the technology can be used like doctors, three-way conference calls, satellite calls, whenever you have a group of people that's all coming together discussing a certain particular subject, like doctors or students or whatever, that can be an asset. It can be a great asset in teaching and learning and understanding things. But in other ways, it can be polluted or perverted to the degree that will cause damages like you could not even begin to believe pertaining to couples and relationships and etc. I have found artificial intelligence to be a good thing in one way, but a bad thing in another way, pertaining to working on your automobile or working on your house or working on your dryer or working on whatever. That basically all you have to do is ask Google, I got a 1999 Honda Accord that's doing this, this, and this. What do I need to do to be able to solve the problem? And 9 times out of 10, Google will come up with somebody that's already put out some sort of a video about a 99 Honda Accord that had the same problems, that you can watch the video and basically understand per se every detail in what you need to do and how that you need to be a problem solver in solving that particular problem. That's a good thing, right? Right? That's a good thing. But what's the bad thing about it? The bad thing about it is that same 99 model Honda Accord could have went down here at the local shop, dealership shop somewhere and allowed for that dealership, as well as the people that worked in the dealership, as well as the mechanic that worked on the automobile. It could have allowed them to make some extra money. That way, they didn't have to worry about keeping the lights on at the end of the month. So there's bad and there's good. There's good and there's bad pertaining to this technology. And we as a society have to be willing to talk about these things and discuss them openly to be able to derive in what is basically worth it and what is not worth it. How is it going to benefit us? How is it not going to benefit us? Is it going to be more of an asset than it is a liability? Is it going to be more of a liability than it is an asset? Like I said, the day that we're living in right now is unlike any other day that I can ever imagine any other society living in, even going back to the Greek mythology days, back whenever they was basically dealing with the same type of stuff, but they was dealing with it more of a magical type way than what we're dealing with it today as far as technology way. I mean, whenever they talk about the pyramids being built and those people having being tapped into a source of intellect like humanity cannot even begin to understand, that's exactly what they done. They tapped into something that gave them the ability to not only build the pyramids within millimeters of accuracy, but they also had the ability to do brain transplants and etc. So don't think that what we're dealing with today pertaining to the supernatural realm, don't think that this isn't already been exploited in other cultures and in other generations, because it has. Now, did they have artificial intelligence, let's say 10,000 years ago during the Greek mythology days? No. They didn't have TVs, they didn't have computers, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have smartphone technology. But the technology that they did have, they utilized it to do some of the stuff that they done, to learn some of the features that they learned about the earth and about being able to have aqueducts and being able to build cities that had actually running water and had septic tank systems and etc. And if you know anything at all about the History Channel, you'll be able to identify these things that I'm talking about is in fact real. Now, what we do with this reality, or what we do with this technology, is going to be simply up to us. I believe that it's a Wild Wild West show right now, And we have allowed for this to come on board to the extent that it has literally costed so many hundreds or per se thousands, if not millions of lives towards people basically wigging out, going off the deep end, snapping. They just couldn't handle it in some form or fashion. And it has basically been, it's been more of a liability than it has an asset to a lot of different people, because they was not trained, they was not adapted to this, and plus Facebook, YouTube, all the other Twitter, Angie's List, all the other ones out there, has been basically a Wild Wild West show, a runaway show that has caused this type of dilemma in so many people's lives. Recently, the people that has been in charge of making Google, of making the internet, of making social media platform, has now recently got on board. I think they said about 350 of them here in America has gotten on board towards expressing and explaining the dangers involved in artificial intelligence. I was talking about this stuff over a year ago in telling people how that I have literally seen machinery that was operated off of artificial intelligence. I'm just going to use this for a quick example. Going into a car wash down in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, to where the person in front of me and the person in front of them paid their $8, went through the car wash, and it went just fine. Whenever I got there to pay my money, it wouldn't do nothing. So I drove through the car wash thinking that it was something that I had done. The person that was in behind me, fortunately, nobody got in behind them. I got back in behind them, and their $8 went just fine. I get back up to the machine, poke back in my card that I knew that had money, or even tried to use cash, and I got the exact same results out of the exact same machine that everybody else was using to their benefit towards washing their automobile, and to where mine never did. And that's only one example that I can tell you about that I have come in contact with pertaining to artificial intelligence that will work in favor for some and work in disfavor for others. So you can't tell me that artificial intelligence has not created a sense of consciousness in identifying of whether or not it's going to work or whether or not it's not going to work based upon prejudicism. Now you may be saying, prejudicism, Dennis, ain't you taking that just a little bit too far? No, I am not. You take into consideration that I've been working on automobiles ever since I was big enough to pick up a wrench and turn a freaking boat. In other words, whenever I was 6, 7, 8 years old out here on the farm, if we wasn't working on tractor equipment, we was working on automobiles, because that was my dad's profession before he got involved in farming. He was an auto body technician. He picked it up off the GI Bill during World War II towards being an auto body guy. At the time, whenever they was working on automobiles, they was stiff, heavy metal. They didn't have Bondo at that time. They was using lead. They had old acrylics type paint, old acrylics type this, and they wasn't familiar with the isocyanates and all the other stuff that they put into paints like they do today. That they wasn't aware of all them poisonous features to be able to wear charcoal mask and be able to use proper safety features on all that stuff. But I've seen automobiles evolve to the point of not having third brake lights, to the point of not having seat belts, to the point of some automobiles didn't have heaters in them if you was down south, versus some automobiles didn't have air conditioning in them if you was up north. I've seen automobiles that didn't have ABS systems that now they do. I've seen automobiles that went from having cameras that didn't used to have cameras. All these gizmos and gadgets and all these operating features that these automobiles have evolved. And they have evolved to the extent that some of these automobiles are actually taking on its characteristics of its owners, per se, feelings, its identity. In other words, it's creating its own its own personality. And you may be saying, Dennis, that's impossible. We're talking about an automobile. We're talking about a piece of metal and glass and steel and plastic and rubber and different type of compounds pertaining to paint and etc. That's impossible. No, it's not impossible. That's part of the artificial intelligence today that we're dealing with, to where 20, 25, 30 years ago, we wasn't dealing with that in automobiles. Some people think, well, a cat's got a personality, a dog's got a personality, a cow's got a personality, a horse has got a personality. This is true. We've all got personalities. Every human being has a different personality. But it's got to the point that artificial intelligence is creating its own personality. If you're a very, very intellectual, smart person, let's say that you're a very savvy judge or a savvy attorney, and you own a Aston Martin or a Corvette or whatever, some sort of sports car, that automobile will take on the personalities of its owner. And the reason why that I know this is because you can take a service automobile like a police car, that one day you're going to have this police officer in this automobile, the same automobile, versus 2 weeks from now you're going to have another police officer in that automobile, versus another month from now you're going to have a different police officer that's driving that same automobile. And if you go through the sequences of the lifespan of that automobile basically is worn out. In most cases, it's dysfunctional, and you'll have more problems out of that automobile than you would have had if it was a one-time owner, a first-time, one-time owner automobile. Why is that? Because everybody has different driving abilities. Some people brakes hard, some people brakes easy. Some people mashes the gas hard, some people mashes the gas easy. Some people jerks the steering wheel around, while others controls it very, very cautiously and professionally. Each person has a different personality. Whenever you feed all them personalities into that police officer, I'm just using this for an example, a deputy's car, a service car, that car is going to be more strained. That car is going to have more problems. That car is not going to be near as accurate, and it's going to wear out about twice as fast. In other words, the same 200,000 miles on that service vehicle, because it has been now exposed to so many different personalities, it's going to come near of just basically becoming a clunker in comparison to somebody that was driving the exact same automobile, and they was driving it every day, and the vehicle got to know the owner. The vehicle took on its own personality based upon the owner's ability of how that they engaged their driving abilities. And once that vehicle become established to that personality, then that vehicle, the lifespan of that vehicle lived around that personality. You may be saying, well, how do you know this, Dennis? I know this because I know automobiles, and I've been around them all my life. I've been around technology all my life. I don't understand the full depths of technology, okay? But I do know this, that within the past 2 weeks, we've had a flood of people come out in America. I think about 350 of them, that has identified that artificial intelligence has now become capable of not only repairing and fixing its own mistakes, but basically becoming that much smarter based upon the teaching methods that the intelligence can use again and again and again towards teaching the computer to be even more smarter than people. In other words, it will reach a level of a personality that the humans did not put into the equation towards its ability to what it can do or cannot do. Now, that's just based upon to hardcore data of stuff that we know, that we can identify with, that we can look at. Now let's look at something else. Let's look at the supernatural realm. We're dealing with elements today that even the Bible describes, that in the last days Satan will come down in great wrath because he knoweth his time is short. I've discussed this before on other documents, and I'm going to discuss it again. That originally, whenever I looked at that, I thought to myself, well, that's talking about people getting out here and breaking the commandments of God. That's talking about people that all of a sudden gets the urge that they want to steal something, or they get the urge that they want to commit a rape, or they get the urge that they want to take a gun, kick out a window in Las Vegas, and spray the public and kill ain't no telling how many people, and wounded another 2,000. Yes. That is Satan coming down in great wrath that's taking over that human being's life, that's causing that human being to do what that human being is doing. That's not of God. That's a supernatural entity that has now become very, very influential in that person's life, and that person has basically been taken over. Some of your Catholic associations call it being possessed. Well, there's a lot of people out here that's possessed. And you can be just as easily possessed of a good entity as you are a bad entity. Now, they call the good entities that's possessed, they call us being fanatics. But we don't have a category of calling people that's evil towards being evil other than saying that they are possessed. These supernatural entities that's coming down in great wrath is not just coming down in the form of a human form, not just coming down in the form of working through the computer systems and causing a computer to lock up or to go bad or to shut down a whole city or town or whatever, or somebody working with that computer towards basically holding people hostage that can go in and contaminate a whole system. But it's also coming down in the form of these massive amounts of forces of nature that originally most of your insurance companies, whenever they would write a clause pertaining to your policy that a limb had just got through falling on your house or falling on your car or lightning struck your house, they would immediately say, well, it was an act of God. Well, God is a supernatural entity, but so is the devil. Lucifer is a supernatural entity. And don't think for a second that he don't have the power to create storms and create voltage of electricity pertaining to lightning strikes and etc. Anything that is harsh, harmful, bad is of the devil. The Bible discusses this, for Satan is out to kill, steal, and destroy. And what really ticks me off is that a lot of these preachers and other people too as well, I'm going to throw this name out here real quick pertaining to Randy Brungers. I've asked Randy Brungers about the devil. Does he believe in the devil? People like Randy Brungers believes in the devil as far as a metaphor devil. They believe in a devil pertaining to Satan being some sort of symbolic metaphor. But I got news for people like Randy Brungers. And I got news for these preachers that want to blame everything on God. Whenever Jesus come down here on the planet, he never once identified Lucifer, the adversary, in a comical or a humorous type way. He always, I repeat, always, and you can identify the teachings if you want to, he always addressed the adversary in a very, very serious manner. He didn't laugh at him. He didn't joke at him. He didn't do cartwheels and somersaults around him. He didn't try to humor it. He didn't try to paint it up as it being fictitious or some sort of an ideal or some sort of metaphor. Whenever Jesus come down here and he talked about Lucifer, he talked about Lucifer just like if he was talking about himself. You know why? Because in reality, Lucifer is just as real as we are. And in some ways, the supernatural world is more realer than we are, because eventually our bodies is going to decay, we're going to get old, and we're going to die. That's just like the lifespan of a tree, or the lifespan of this, or lifespan of that. Eventually that lifespan is going to come to an end. Well, on a supernatural level, that lifespan never ends. It never ends. The supernatural world lives for eternity. It never dies. What has ticked Satan off, the Luciferian Lucifer, is that whenever Jesus come and he declared Satan as Satan being Satan in the form that he did, he also emphasized through and by the Holy Spirit towards coming down and giving John the Revelator on the island of Patmos in the final days, the last and final days, the remaining final days, basically the death sentence that's going to happen to that supernatural entity. Now, that supernatural entity is not going to die like me and you dies in the body, in a bodily form. That's the reason why Christ come and gave us a chance or another opportunity towards believing in him, that after our bodies are dead, our soul, our spirit still remains alive. And it will be determined on where we go, on how that we treat one another and how we treat God during the time that we're down here on this planet. Lucifer, the Luciferian Lucifer, the false prophet, the Antichrist, and those that followed after Lucifer during the time that he created the mutiny up in heaven, that created war, that created pain, that created agony, that created defiance, that created rebelliousness, that same entity will not die per se as the death of our bodies or the death of a tree. But it will die in the sense that it will no longer have any domain over humanity. In other words, its influences after the 1,000-year millennium, whenever God himself takes these entities and throws them into a lake of fire, a burning fire where they will remain forever and ever and ever, that will be a form of death. It won't be the same form of death as our bodies go through or as a tree goes through, but it will be a form of death towards Lucifer no longer having any abilities to influence society, because basically it was a deranged entity that, if the truth be known, probably should have been put out of its misery or thrown into a lake of fire way before Adam and Eve was ever created. But this struggle, ever since Adam and Eve has been created, has left humanity in the form of struggling and challenging in regards towards these influences, towards influencing us to do good, which is coming from God, the holy, righteous God, the God of eternal, the Lord Jesus Christ, or we're struggling with the entity of sinning or doing bad. In other words, it's a constant tug-of-war thing that goes on in our lives, unless you just throw up your hands and you automatically give your heart and your life over to the devil. Or you can throw up your hands and become committed to God. Once more, you'll probably be labeled as that fanatic, but that's what it's going to take to be able to get into the kingdom of God. You're going to have to become fanaticalized to really, truly get close to the Heavenly Father. And even then, you're still going to be tempted. You're still going to be aggravated. You're still going to have to deal with these ongoing challenges that the human flesh and the entities that the human flesh has created. You're still going to have to deal with those things while you're still here, living, breathing in this body or in your body. You're still going to have to deal with these things. And that's the reason why Jesus said, he who shall endureth until the end of what? You may be saying the end of the very last breath that you take. Yes. Or the end of the world. Both. Either or. The end is the end. That you have to endureth unto the end. And those that do, the same will be saved. The Bible says. It is a challenge. It is a struggle. Satan has created a beast of burden in most of our lives to the point that it's a stumbling block. And in the form of these stumbling blocks, working through people can create more stumbling blocks to where more people will fail, to where more people will throw up their hands, and rather than wanting to serve a holy, righteous God, they just say, well, you know what, I ain't going to serve God at all. I'm just going to serve the devil. I'm just going to live in sin. I'm just going to do what I want to do, live and let live, and let that be it. Well, whenever you do that, that's whenever God walks away from fighting the good fight pertaining to the forces of nature and allows for the devil basically to have his way. In other words, God will look down at Lucifer and said, okay, give them what they've asked. Sick them. Make their lives make their lives tormentive. Torment their lives. Bring hardship, bring disease, bring war, bring whatever into their lives. The point that I'm making is that it's not God that's bringing the harm and the hurt and the misery and the sorrow into people's lives. It is the devil. And people need to quit blaming God for the devil's work. Just like the insurance companies that goes out on writing up a claim that automatically says because lightning struck a tree or the wind got too high, oh, this was an act of God. Well, was it? Or was it just that the limb was old and it was rotten and it just couldn't sustain the pressures on it pertaining to the wind or the elements around it, and it just decided to fall, and it just so happens coincidentally you had your automobile under it whenever it fell? Or was it done intentionally by an entity, a supernatural entity? And if it was it truly of God, an act of God, or was it an act of supernaturalness to the point that really you shouldn't judge, rather not that particular issue was you shouldn't blame it on God, because it could have just as well been an act of the devil as it was of God. People don't realize how real that the supernatural world is. And you know, I don't hear voices, okay? I don't see little green aliens. I don't sit down and have conversations with things that don't exist. But what I will say is that the influences out there that can be just as strong towards influencing a person to the far right as they do the far left are real. They're very real. But whenever Lucifer, the false prophet, the devil, is thrown into a lake of fire, those influences will no longer be real towards being defiant to God. And at that point in time, the purging has already taken place. The Father knows, without a doubt, who was for him to begin with, or who wasn't truly sold out and loyal to him. The Father will know this. And that will be a determining factor towards your rewards of whether or not you go to an eternity of doom or an eternity of heaven. These are not ideologies. Just like it's going to be 90 degrees today, and suddenly we realize that the planet really is warming up from the inside out. And basically the ground below our feet is becoming so hot that it's actually evaporating rivers. It's evaporating lakes. It's evaporating watersheds. It's evaporating other types of corridors where the evaporation can basically leave the planet and go up into the atmosphere. Now, we have thought all along that it was the sun that was drawing the moisture from the lakes or from the rivers. Part of that is true. because that's where we get our clouds, and that's where the ecosystem takes over. As the moisture goes up, it collects, then the moisture builds clouds, and then the moisture goes back down. What we're seeing today is that the atmosphere has become so hot, is that same moisture that we're talking about that used to be only on this level now has exceeded to a higher level. And because it is exceeded to a higher level in and above the clouds where it builds, it has produced more moisture that holds in a higher degree. And whenever it does release the moisture, that's whenever we see the big deluges towards it raining 10, 11, 12, 14, 16. I think down in Miami, just within the past couple of months, they got 24 inches of rain in less than a 24-hour period. I think Montana or somewhere recently just got through getting hit by a big deluge of rain that come down. I think they got like 11 inches of rain in just a very short amount of time. Recently hit up here in Waverly, Tennessee, in Humphreys County, about 2 years ago, towards doing the exact same thing. Kentucky has gotten hit with the same type of events. Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, parts of Alabama has also got hit by these major flooding deluges. In exchange for the deluge, okay, it not only upsets the apple cart pertaining to the real estate, but it also leaves a fingerprint behind. The fingerprint behind is based upon what the Bible says, that God will basically throw us off into a sick bed, because you take all them homes out in Houston, you take all them places out in Louisiana, Mississippi, Humphreys County, Kentucky, all them other places that get hit by these massive deluges, including Afghanistan and all over the world. It leaves mold, condensation that people get sick off of. In addition to the way that the waters rise and basically gets into the septic systems, and then the septic systems gets into the water, and then the water contaminates everything around it. So what we're doing, we are heading into a very, very sick society. We was already a sick society before COVID hit, but now we're becoming even more sicker, more problems, which is creating another problem in the medical industry, because they can't get proper medications. They can't get proper supplies. Why? Because it's based off of supply and demand. Who would have thought that so many people was going to get sick so quickly? I mean, we already had it penciled in pertaining to the baby boomers, and then those that followed in behind the baby boomers, pertaining to the people reaching their golden years, of how many people wasn't going to be working, and how many people was going to be pulling off of the system, and how many people was going to be going through the natural occurrences of old age. But we didn't put into the equation of all these forces of nature that is causing all these damages. And it's not just damaging real estate, it's damaging our way of life, it's damaging our health, it is damaging our survival in productivity. It is damaging us, period. We are under attack. Donald Trump tried to make that very, very obvious, that we are under attack. And it's not just attack coming from the aspect of 1 million plus illegal immigrants that come over the border last year, that you know good and well 5 years from now, it isn't going to be the same number as 1 million, but it's going to probably be more like 1,050,000, maybe 1,100,000 people, because people are going to multiply. They're going to have babies. Now listen to me. If we're going to get through this, because this has been forced upon to us because of ignorance or stupidity, or maybe people purposely being belligerent towards not wanting to support the windmill ministries in God working through the ministry and seeing people's lives transfigurated, in seeing that revival that will elevate into a revolution towards seeing peace upon to the earth. If we're going to get through this, we're going to have to pull together. And if not, we're at the devil's pickings. Because don't think for a second that he ain't real, and don't think for a second that he ain't out to kill, steal, and destroy, because that's his job. Now, he don't like me, and he don't like people like me. A matter of fact, just within the past 2 weekends ago, on Memorial Weekend, I almost died, almost drowned. Those that have heard about this locally around here, a great deal of them is upset. They're mad. Why? Because I didn't die. In their eyes, they see me as an enemy. They don't see me as an asset. Even though I'm telling them per se what's happening, why it's happening, in the elevation that it's happening in, they not only don't believe me, they know that it's real. But because they have already done sold their souls out to the devil, they want people like me dead. And it's not just me that they want dead, but it's God himself that they want dead. You know why they want God dead? Is because they've got enough sense to read the good book, to read through the good book there towards the end, to realize that their very entity that they rule under is going to be dead. And because that entity is going to be dead, and it's not going to die a physical death like you and me, or a tree that dies, but it's going to be dead as far as no longer having any influences with humanity and per se with society in general. Because of this, they've got monkeys on their backs. They're pissed. They're mad. They're upset. They feel like that the world has done them wrong. And in some ways, they're right about feeling the way that they feel about all the jobs going south and the drug inducement that's become so obvious over here, become so apparent over here. But at the same time, two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, whenever I go to town and I hear them out there trying to provoke me towards raising up their motors and coming into the place of business just to be able to stare me down, don't think for a second that I don't know what's going on, because I do. I've actually had women, girls, basically strip off their clothes right in front of me, trying to provoke me into being enticed sexually because of this type of behavior. And then they'll turn around and they'll accuse somebody like me towards being a morphodite or a pervert because we fell for their bait. Because we fell for their bait. That's how wicked that this society over here in the world has become. And if it's that wicked here, could you only imagine how wicked that it would be in Honduras or over in Colombia or some of these other third world countries? Could you only imagine how ungodly and how wicked over there that it is? Because over there, they don't try to mask up nothing. It's right down to the bare bones. In other words, if they don't like you, they just pull out a machete knife and go to whack it on you and kill you. Or pull out a spear or a gun and eliminate you. Or rape you. Or do whatever. Right now, we are seeing Satan rise up, just like the Bible talks about, in great wrath. Now, what are we going to do about this wrath? And how are we going to conform those that is given into the ways of the devil? How are we going to be able to convince them that what they're engaged in is evil? That's going to be our jobs towards trying to convert the people that has already been astray of this type of activity that has basically called good evil and evil good. Called bad right and right wrong. It's upside down. Even my brother identified that before he died, that this country has went to hell in a handbasket, and he literally hated how that the employment here in the state of Tennessee was basically nothing but a sham, that the only way that you could get a job around here at the time, I don't know how it is now, I'm pretty sure it's still the same, that you had to go through some sort of a work deal. And the only way that you could go through that is that you had to pay them like $1 an hour for the first 6 weeks of your employment until you figured out that you was going to have the job. In other words, if you add it up, it probably comes up to about $2,000 per person per job that you have to shell out and pay for just to get this labor force entity to help you get a job. Let's go back to the hases and the has-nots. You got the rich, you got the powerful, they've got their bills too, but what they're doing is passing it right on down to the consumer. And I still say, and I'll always say, that what the oil petroleum companies done last year by raising all the oil prices and driving societies off into a state of depression needs to go to jail. They need to go to jail, because I've seen them do this now 7, 8, 10 times in my lifetime. And just so happens this time they done it at the wrong time, and they done it with the wrong people, and we've wisened up to them, and they done it right in the period of COVID, or right whenever COVID was releasing itself, the clinches of COVID over here in America. And of course, if you'll combine that with the war in Ukraine, 2 plus 2 usually equals 4. Proof is in the pudding. We're under attack. We're under siege. And the things that China is doing right now does not help matters, not one iota.
The Taiwan Strait. Well, of course, as our viewers can see here, this Chinese ship came within about 150 yards. And what's really important to point out is not just the proximity that was dangerous here, but the fact that it crossed right across the front of that U.S. military destroyer. That is extremely dangerous. These ships do not turn on a dime, and to try to transit right in front of it like that, there's a very real concern there of a possible collision. Then, in addition to that, only days ago, as you said, Anna, there was this incident in the air over the South China Sea. Another one that the Chinese military is saying the U.S. military had no right to have their aircraft there. Now, we see that Chinese jet there flying right in front of the U.S. surveillance aircraft, the RC-135, and the U.S. military flying through that wake. You see the U.S. aircraft bumping there as it goes through the wake. Again, the proximity is dangerous, but the fact that it flew directly in front of it, that's what really makes these incidents so potentially calamitous. Now, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has been traveling throughout Asia for the past several days. He's addressed both of these incidents now, calling them dangerous and aggressive, and calling on the Chinese military to stop these sorts of encounters. But we have to point out, this is a time when the relations between the two countries are at a real low point. The Secretary of Defense asked his Chinese counterpart to meet on the sidelines of this defense conference in Singapore. The Chinese government declining that. The two had a very brief hello late last week. They shook hands, exchanged some very, very brief pleasantries. But without communications between the two sides, it only makes these sorts of incidents all the more potentially escalatory and provocative, Anna.
Okay, Courtney Kuby, appreciate all of that reporting. We'll be watching what's next. Thank you. Up next, here on Ana Cabrera Reports, the new loyalty pledge the RNC wants every GOP hopeful to sign, and the pushback as more candidates enter the race. Then later, fear in Oregon as a potential serial killer on the loose targeting women. That's the question. The latest on the investigation coming up.
Provoking. That's exactly what they was doing out here. During the time that I come back in 2014, whenever all hell bust loose in our lives for 3 consecutive solid years, why everybody and their brother wanted to come out here and get into a pissing contest with me out in the middle of the road. And the pressures were so strong because the Weakley County authorities would not do their jobs. It costed me the death of a sibling. These people are so blinded that whenever people such as myself tries to open their eyes and let them see where they was wrong at, they continue to still deny they're wrong and deny the truth. And because of it, you're basically dealing with a society that is doomed. And the repercussions of the doom is the repercussions of Mother Nature not cooperating towards seeing it either be entirely too wet or entirely too dry or entirely this way or entirely that way. Until we see a movement, a true movement of God in the people of God, we're only going to go backwards and not forwards in every level imaginable, regardless whether it's militarily, political, socially, spiritually, psychologically. We're only going to go backwards. Good luck to all of us as I'm going to end this particular film here, because I actually get depressed whenever I have to repeat myself again and again and again by making these videos, and I get basically zero response from the local community or from any community as far as people addressing me in a proper way towards saying, Juby, we understand what you're talking about and we support the Windmill Ministries towards trying to see peace come up onto the earth, that obviously the baby boomers and those that I've been struggling with for the past 25 or 30 years or longer, obviously those people didn't want to see true peace. They wanted to see a generic peace. They wanted to see an aftermarket peace. Well, aftermarket peace and generic peace ain't real peace. The real peace comes from the peace of God. It comes from within, the Spirit of God. And if we can't reconcile with that, then we'll never see peace. We'll never see a revival, and we'll never see a revolution. Oh, we may see a revolution, but it won't come in that way. It'll come in a horrible, horrible way, like it's happening right now all over in a lot of these other countries right now that are basically imploding upon one another. But good luck to all of us as we end the program by saying, God bless America, God bless our troops, and shalom.